Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode. In this week's episode, we're comparing a quickie tire deflator, which removes your valve core, a standard air compressor, which is just my direct comparison because I don't have one of the ordinary deflators. We've got the Storms equivalent, which is the Maxi Trax, which also has the pressures written on them. And then we've got the infamous Max Trax Deflate, which is the one that people can use to inflate and deflate their tires. Anyway, with that, we'll get into this week's episode. This is a quickie Deflate tire pressure gauge, which is a King's tire pressure gauge. Heaps of other brands do exactly the same thing. All it does is remove the valve core and then dump the air out of your tire. Now the whole process of this here is meant to be quick, so that's the whole idea of that one. You still got a gauge. Now when you move over, that's your standard tire compressor. Now you can use this to deflate your tire. It's got a button on the side and you're also getting a readout at the same time. We're not talking in particular about any brands here today. This is just more of a general overview of what the differences are. So if you have a compressor and it's got a gauge, 9 times out of 10 you should be able to just do this. You won't need to go out and buy any of this other fancy gear. If you're wondering what you should be doing first, hang around to the end of this video and you should be able to work it out. But this is probably where I would start with, is buy yourself an air compressor and hopefully it's got a gauge, and then you'll be able to use it to deflate your tires. Now, so from there, we're moving up. So something like this is going to cost you somewhere around the $30 mark, up to $80 for like an ARB one. I've had an ARB one, and to be honest, they're basically pretty much identical. It's just that it was red rather than black. I've still got my bag from the ARB one just because I needed somewhere to put it. That didn't come with a bag. The ARB compressor itself doesn't come with a bag or anything. You can buy bags for them, but I leave it inside my toolbox and it's all sealed and nice and clean. And then, so something like this is going to cost you anywhere from that same sort of mark right up to 100 and something bucks. In Australian dollars, obviously, we're talking. And then from there, we're moving over to the fancy Max Trax Deflate. So this is the 2 hose option. They do a 4 hose as well. I opted for the 2 hose, and that's in relation to sometimes the tire pressures from front to rear will be different depending on what I've got on the rear, in terms of weight. The other option, if you were to go with a 4, you've got more hoses. If you're running the same tire pressures front and back, that's fine, but then you got more hoses to deal with as well, and you're going to be paying a little bit more money for it. So that's why I opted for the 2 hose Deflate Max Trax tire deflator. It's also got your gauge, you dump your tire pressure through there. It's got a Schrader valve in the bottom, so you can go ahead and actually pump it up through this option as well. Now this is a fast option to inflate your tires because you're doing the 2 tires at the same time, and your tires will inflate from a value called CFM, not so much litres per minute, which a lot of compressors will compare their flow rate under litres per minute, but you need to work out the CFM, and the CFM will also go through the value of the valve as well. So that's why that is incredibly fast for inflating your tires. Not so much deflating, it's not very fast, but for inflating it is fast. The last one I've got, this is a Maxi Trax tire deflator. So these first came out from Storms. From what I'm aware of, they made a brass option with no pressures written on these at all. Now, so these ones in particular have a pressure on them, and from my experience, they are quite accurate in terms of what pressure you set them to is virtually the pressure that you get out of them, testing it in a comparison to this ARB gauge. So they work really well. I had the Storms, I've still got Storms at home. I haven't used them in a while, But in the end, what I was coming to, because they didn't have any pressures written on them, you don't really know what you're going to let your tyres down to. So therefore, if the nut ever comes loose, you're sort of just guessing. Now, I know you could just go ahead and just readjust it back up, theoretically, but if you're about to drop your tyre pressures, you're not going to go ahead and try and work that out on the spot, because it's going to take you too long. There's no point in basically using it, in my opinion, because you want to get down to the beach and enjoy your time, not worry about what your tyre pressure gauge things got problems about. With that, we'll move on to the next step and basically comparing the advantages and disadvantages of all of these together. Stop the episode right there. Hit that pause button. I've put a QR code at the top of the screen here right now, so you can get a quick, easy access, use your phone, use your camera, and I'll give you a quick link to the YouTube channel, and you can hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the content. With that, we'll get into this week's episode. Pumped up 2 tyres on the vehicle. Now, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the MaxTrax in Deflate first. So the reasoning for starting out with this one here, just because convenience. Now, the reason why I've done 2 tyres rather than 1 or 4, I've got to do 2 because it's a 2 hose kit. So it's going to be the closest comparison you guys are going to have between all of these tyre deflator options. The one option that I'm not going to test, and that's going to be the compressor deflator, because I feel like the ARB one in particular is slower than a lot of others. It's not really a direct comparison. We're all really testing, and when we're testing the ARB one, is the direct comparison of the ARB specifically to the rest of these, and that's not what we're about today. Anyway, so we'll go ahead, we'll drop the tyres from 40 PSI down to 20, and the reasoning why I'm doing it to 20 is because of these little MaxiTrax ones. You'll be able to see here, if this will focus. With storage on the MaxTrax in Deflate, does come with a bag. I haven't bought this bag aftermarket. I think this costs me around 190 bucks. They have gone up since I've purchased this. I think they're just over 200 now. Now, with the actual handpiece itself, or the gauge, you have got this hook here as well, so you can hang it off your bull bar or anywhere that's convenient for yourself, and that just slides into the back and it slides on and off, so it's pretty convenient. What I've done, I've gone and put this back inside the bag. Now, the reasoning for this, I'm just trying to make the process simulating as if you're trying to do it yourself, and try and get a better comparison to, rather than setting everything up ready to go and then dropping the tyres, because realistically you got to deal with these hoses, and you're still going to have to roll them up once you're finished as well. So that's the reasoning behind that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to time it on my phone for the purpose of this video. I'm not going to put a time lapse on the screen. It's going to be too hard. This episode will go for years if I tried to record everything like that. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is press start on this now, and then I'll go ahead and rip all this out. And off we go. So what you might have noticed, I've already got the valve caps already off, but that's fine because it's going to be the same for all of them, so it's going to be repetitive in terms of the time. And this is pretty normal in terms of having to try and untangle them. I try and put them together as easy as I can. Anyway, so we'll let that drop. So that started at 40 PSI, and we'll give that about a minute or so and we'll check it again. There we go, 20 PSI, and I'll stop this. So we've got 4 minutes and 31 seconds to let that down. It still isn't a direct comparison to the rest of these yet, because the process hasn't finished for these. I've now got to pack up the Tyre deflator, put it back in this bag and just roll it up. So I'm just trying to get a direct comparison for all of you guys to actually fully understand that I'm not just dumping the pressures and getting a time for you. The process for this Tyre deflator is the hoses. So it is something you do have to be mindful of. Other YouTubers might just put out there, this is how fast the Maxtrax Indeflate is, because they get paid from Maxtrax to compare it. Not bagging out Maxtrax, I actually quite like this deflator and inflator, just trying to get a direct comparison for you. So anyway, I'll continue on with that timer while I finish packing it all up. Done. There we go. So we've got 5 minutes and 13 seconds to let 2 tyres down on the Maxtrax Indeflate for you, which is actually mind-blowingly slower than what I actually originally thought that this would actually be. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back up and air up both of those tyres again to 40 psi. Bring out the Maxi-Track Indeflates, the equivalent to the Storms, to give us a bit of an idea of how they go. I'm going to go ahead. So obviously, as you saw, the Maxtrax Indeflate was 5 minutes and 13 seconds. It's a lot longer than what I actually thought it would be. It feels a little bit longer compared to some of the others that I've used, but I didn't actually expect it to be that long. So now what I've done now, so I've adjusted these to 20 psi. Now, if you have the Storms don't have readings, so you've got to try and fiddle around with them to adjust them to 20 psi. That would be something that I would recommend Storms to actually improve on, because they are an expensive Tyre deflator, the actual original Storms are. This is probably the only thing that they're lacking out on. They do make good quality gear. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is chuck these on, and then we'll time them. Sorry, tell a lie. I was going to time them once they come out of the bag. So basically, the bag's only tiny, there's not much really to worry about them anyway. So I may as well start the timer now. Reset, start. Right, so with these, I just wanted to show you how they're built and how they're constructed. So these are spring loaded inside. So when you put them onto the valve, you've got to like pop them out and then it will deflate, otherwise they won't deflate. And then to stop them, you just touch them on the end and that will just pull it straight in. And that's how you can stop the air from coming out of these. Now the Storms I have at home, I'm not aware that they do have that. There's a little knob sticking out the top. I haven't played with them that much. Yeah, but I quite like those because you can stop them and fiddle around with them nice and easy. Pull it back out. Righto, so on the stop clock, we've got 4 minutes 50 seconds. It's still going because I haven't finished. Now this one over here is just about finished, and the reason how you can tell is the air will start coming out of it really slowly. So it's probably only, it's probably less than a PSI, maybe 2 PSI from finishing. But the purpose of the video, I'm going to go until it absolutely stops. You can still hear the rear quite clearly. And the front one has stopped now, and so has that rear. Right, so we're at 5 minutes and 29 seconds. Now I actually thought that Maxtrax Indeflate would have been slower than these Maxi-Trax Indeflates. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead, rip these off. There we go. So we got 5 minutes and 57 seconds. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Just finished airing up the tyres again. Back to 40 psi, and interestingly enough, for your own knowledge, comparing these to the ARB compressor, the one that I put on the front was at 19 psi, the one that I put on the rear was at 18.5, so it dropped a whole 1.5 psi more than what I had anticipated for it to drop, which is still, it's close enough. It wasn't like 4 or 5 psi or even 3 psi, so I would say that that's reliable enough for them to work. Anyway, so all I'm going to do now, I'm going to go over and grab the quickie Deflate. Now, with this option, this removes your valve core out of the stem of the valve itself. So it should drop air a lot faster than those other two options. So basically, in the end here, you've got two little prongs, and they go down the side of the valve core and rotate like that, and then pops back out once it's fully undone, and then your valve core will sit in the top piece of this assembly up here. And then by lifting this up and down, there are two little holes out the side, and that drops the air pressure out of the tyre. So theoretically this will be a hell of a lot faster than those other two options that we just went through. So now we're going to go ahead, start the timer, chuck the quickie Deflate on, and we'll get a bit of a comparison of this one, and then I'll move it over to the rear tyre, dropping from 40 psi all the way to 20. You do have the disadvantage of you've got to keep monitoring the tyre pressure because it will dump a lot of pressure really fast. So you do have to keep onto it. Anyway, so go ahead, we'll press start on the timer. There we go, so that's dropping down now. And just for your own knowledge, this tyre deflator in particular reads 1 psi less than what is actually in the tyre. I've had this tyre deflator for a long time now. Probably one of the longest pieces of equipment that I've actually got in terms of full driving gear. So anyway, so I'm going to keep monitoring that because that does drop tyre pressure up really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and check it now. So we're already at 24 psi. 22. There we go, 20 psi. So the gauge is sitting at 19 psi. So I know I definitely have 20 psi inside that tyre right now. I'll come around to the rear. And again, 39 psi when I know there's definitely 40 in there. There we go, so that's 22 psi. There we go, and 19, so that's got 20 psi in there again. Pull that back off. And then we'll go ahead and stop the timer. There we go. So we've got 2 minutes and 47 seconds, which is actually still longer than what I originally thought it would be, which is actually quite interesting for my own knowledge. So that sort of gives you a bit of a direct comparison in terms of speed, the overall. In terms of conveniency and reliability, I'm going to put it down to the Max Trax Deflate. You're getting a mechanical gauge, and you're getting the convenience of doing 2 tyres at the same time. However, you've still got to deal with hoses, which is then where I'd say the absolute most efficient and easiest deflator is going to be the quickie deflator, but you've got to pull the valve core out. Now, if you're not careful, that valve core can come shooting out and you can lose it. So if you're using a quickie indeflate, I'd highly recommend you carry spare valves with you all the time, just in case you do lose one. Because if you drop your tyre valve core out and you don't have a spare tyre with you, you're basically done. You're pretty much, yeah, it's all over. If you do, however, have a spare tyre and you don't have any spare valve cores, you could easily just remove your spare valve core out of your spare tyre. That'd be easier than changing out your whole tyre altogether. That's what I would do if I personally didn't have any spare valve cores. So now basically we're just going to compare all of these together of what, this is just my opinion, not comparing so much the brands, just in terms of the overall averages of what you'll find out there on the market. So basically the indeflate with hoses, these options, the pros to them, they are going to be convenient. You can do 2 tyres or you can do 4 tyres at the same time. They're also going to be reliable because they've got a mechanical gauge on them. You can get some with an electronic gauge as well for any of your fancy ones that do want something a little bit more blingier. And the advantage of also of inflating with these. So inflating with the ARB compressor, I've done another video on that, comparing. So I'll link that down in the description for you so you can have a look at that as well. So that's basically the pros to that one. Next one, we got the quickie indeflate. So this little sucker here. So basically the pros to that, it's pretty obvious. It's fast, incredibly fast. So fast you've got to basically monitor how much pressure is actually coming out. Basically live all the time. What else have we got? So we got small, takes up no room. You can put it in your glove box, you can put it in the side pocket of your door. And compact, and then reliable is the other one because they're a mechanical gauge again. And the price, so you can pick these up for roughly 20 bucks if you really want to, or you can spend right up to like 80 bucks. I think I paid for the ARB one that I used to have. So they are really good. Now when we move on to the Maxi Trek, so these ones here, or the Storms, the basically preset tyre deflator. These ones here, I'm going to say they're convenient because they're small, they take up no room. You screw them on, you leave them, and hopefully they stop once they reach to the adjusted pressure. So they're small, compact, and they're a mid-range pricing. So they're going to set you back a little bit more than your quickie tyre deflator, but not quite as much as the Max Trax hose setup in terms of the indeflate. So in terms of, they are just going to be convenient, small and mid-range pricing. So you can pick up some flasher one than these ones. These are certainly on the cheaper end of what you're going to be paying for those. Now the the cons. This is the one that this is just all from my experience. So when we talk back to the pros to having the compressor gauge, now if you actually have a compressor gauge, the pro to it is you've got it with the compressor, so 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to let your tyres down with it. The cons to that one is it's going to be incredibly slow. So slow I didn't even bother recording it in this episode because it's probably just going to be a waste of time. You may as well put a key in your valve and then check it with the gauge, therefore you get a reliable pressure for yourself. So that'll be the pros and cons to that option. Now the cons to the Max Trax indeflate, you're going to be, so a lot of hose, so you've got to reel up all this hose, you've got to store it somewhere, the size of it, it's basically, it's not really that convenient to use in terms of wrapping all your hoses up. You're going to have hoses dangling everywhere. The other con is the price to these. So obviously these are now somewhere around the $220 mark, might be just over 200 bucks, somewhere around there. I picked mine up for 189 directly before the price actually went up. It was just by sheer luck. And then the other one is low pressures on this one in particular, but on other brands they're going to have different gauges. So as you start to run low, anything under sort of like 12 PSI, there's not very many readings. It's basically, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 readings between 0 and 10 PSI. So 2.5 PSI per little line that you've got on here. And then above that, above your 10 PSI, each line is 2 PSI. So that's okay, that's fine. But it's just something else to be mindful of. If you're using this to run extremely low pressures, I wouldn't recommend it. Now, so onto the quickie deflate. So the cons, it's not really convenient in the sense that you're going to have to sit there and monitor your tyre pressure as you're doing them. And it's not just one tyre. We saw this one do 2 minutes and 47 seconds along 2. So you're going to be looking somewhere around the 6 minute mark, or just under the 6 minute mark, to do all 4 tyres, and you're going to have to stand there and continue to check your tyre pressures. So in terms of conveniency, that's its biggest con to that one. Now when we move on to the maxi tracks or the Storms or your preset tyre deflator, the cons to that one there, the biggest con that I can really think of, it's going to come down to reliability. Now I'm not saying that maxi track do a unreliable tyre deflator, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the overall average of these are known to stick on when reducing your tyre pressures. So it is something else to be mindful of. Although the whole concept of this, you screw it on, leave it until they stop, I would still go around checking your tyre pressures. Well, it's not so much checking your tyre pressures, making sure they stop in the order that you put them on. It's just something else to just bear in mind of that, because they can get, I haven't had it happen to me, but I've heard of other people saying it with this style, but I've had the Storms let it tie down all the way, because I thought that it would stop at 18 PSI, which is where I had it adjusted to, and it just dropped the tyre pressure all the way down. So it is just something else to bear in mind. Just make sure your tyres do start start stopping in the same sequence as you put them on. So that'll do it for this week's episode, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, comment down below if you've got any questions, if you've got any recommendations, or if you want me to try something else. If you've got another tyre deflator or something that's different to these options, these are the most common options that you're going to find. There's also the pen style tyre deflator, which you can go and Google that to give you guys a bit of an idea. So these are the most common. Anyway, if you've got any questions, comment down below, let me know. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you guys in next week's episode. See ya.